to the system is down.
Well, you know what they say, don't meet your heroes, right? Or at the very least, don't go on their podcast and debate flat Earth with them. Not something that most people have to worry about, because that's not really an opportunity that presents itself too often. So what happened was, I had Nate Henry, the vocalist of the band Sherwood, and the co-host of the podcast Don't Feed the Trolls on my show, back in episode 22. We talked about Bigfoot and some other conspiracy stuff that he really enjoys digging into. And I brought up the topic of flat Earth, just asking if he had looked into it at all. And he said he hadn't heard anything about it, didn't know anything about it, and was curious to find out more. So he invited me on his show, Don't Feed the Trolls, to discuss the topic. Now that show is also co-hosted by Matt Macdonald of the band The Classic Crime, which I've been listening to for probably 12 to 13 years now. And I've been a big fan of Matt's work and a big fan of everything that he does. But he's not a big fan of the stuff that I'm talking about, apparently. He may have got a little testy with some of it, but you know me, I don't take offense to anything. I especially don't take offense to somebody thinking that the flat Earth theory is crazy, because, of course, the flat Earth theory is crazy. Whether it's true or not, the flat Earth theory is crazy. But I enjoy talking about it, and I enjoy debating it, and I haven't really gone back and listened to this episode, so I'm not sure how well I held my own. You be the judge. You let me know. This was recorded over 6 months ago, I think. It's been quite a while, and I've just been holding on to it. Kind of forgot about it, which is why I haven't released it until now. So, yeah, I just wanted to put it out there and see what you guys thought and give you guys a little bit of fun bonus to sink your teeth into. And if you enjoy this and want to support The System Is Down, go join our Patreon program, The Downers Club, and you'll get a bunch more bonus. I'm going to be posting the episode that I did on the Lions of Liberty podcast, where I debated flat Earth again. And we post multiple episodes every single week. So if you guys want to get all of that, you want a bunch of extra stuff to really veg out on some crazy thoughts, just go to tsidpod.com/support, and you can sign up for that for as little as $5 a month. Anyway, here's the fun, comfortable episode of Don't Feed the Trolls, where I got the chance to debate one of my childhood heroes on the topic of flat Earth. Yeah, let's get weird.
Welcome to Don't Feed the Trolls, everybody. This is Matt speaking. We are a few days behind on releasing an episode this week. We've been super busy. I'm getting ready to go on tour with my band, The Classic Crime, and Nate and I haven't been able to get together to record some ideas we've had, but we will be meeting. I'll be flying into Nashville, and we will be meeting up in person to track some live episodes, or not really live. There won't be an audience, but there will be a guest in person, which should be an interesting dynamic. So we will have a brand new episode for you coming up next week, very soon. For this week, we're not going to leave you hanging. If you are not a patron over at patreon.com/don'tfeedthetrolls, then you have not heard this episode. This is originally an exclusive episode released just for our patrons on the Flat Earth conspiracy. Some of you might have heard about it. It was an episode we did with Dan Smotz, who does like a conspiracy theory podcast. And he kind of played, I guess, devil's advocate to my belief that the Earth is in fact a globe. And I got to admit, I was a little bit angry during the podcast at times, which maybe is why Nate and I decided not to release it to the public, because maybe I was being, I don't know, inflammatory or disingenuous of the Flat Earth conspiracy. But actually listening back, I didn't come off as angry as I felt. I usually feel anger pretty intensely, like my shoulder starts twitching, my blood starts pumping, and I think that I'm really angry when I actually think I held it together pretty good. But yeah, I have major issues with, I guess, not only the theory, but how it sort of implicates basically everything we know in the modern era due to science as fraudulent in some regards. So I did take some offense to that. But we wanted to play it for you because turns out it was decently entertaining. So for those of you who are not patrons, you will not have heard this unless you somehow pirated the exclusive podcast from our Patreon. But first, I want to let you know I'm flying into Nashville. That's where Nate and I are going to be recording some podcasts. Then I'll be heading out with my band, The Classic Crime, on tour with Matt and Toby. Matt and Toby of Emery and the Bad Christian Podcast. We're going to be riding along on the bus with them. They're going to be playing songs. We're going to be playing songs. We've got VIP tickets where we do like a meet and greet. And we do photos. And we do a Q&A. And it's kind of just a cool little hang sesh before the show. So if you're interested in meeting up and meeting with the band, maybe you're a fan of the band, maybe you're not, maybe you just listen to this podcast, come say hello. The tour starts in St. Louis, Missouri, and heads to Little Rock, Arkansas, and then we'll be in Dallas, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Mesa, Arizona, Los Angeles, California, Sacramento, California, Portland, Oregon, and then we end in my home city, home sweet home, Seattle, Washington, at the Crocodile. So you can check out dates at theclassiccrime.com. All the tickets and information are there. This tour starts February 28th, which is in 6 days. And then it goes through to March 10th. So if you're hearing this now, go to theclassiccrime.com and grab some tickets, if you're interested, of course. And would love to meet you and see you out there. If you want to know what The Classic Crime sounds like, if you've never heard of us, which of course we've shilled our bands, Sherwood and The Classic Crime, respectively, on this show quite a bit. So if maybe you're new, it's the music playing underneath me right now. So if you like it, come see it live. All right, without further delay, here is an argument about Flat Earth.
I feel like I've known you my whole life, Matt.
Well,
Right.
that is the way things are going. That's another conspiracy.
It's funny because I went to the MXP Expire and Frenzy show last weekend, and I walked up to Mike Carrera, and I was like, "Hey, man, I was on your podcast, or you were on my podcast." He's like, "Oh, yeah, internet friends." And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is awkward." Okay.
Mike's kind of aloof, anyways. I mean, I've toured with him, and I've been on his podcast like in person. And he might walk past me on the street and not even recognize me. So I wouldn't take it personally.
All right, so I'm going to try to round us in. Welcome, Dan, to the podcast.
Dan, how do you say your last name?
It's not my official last name, but it is Smotz.
Dan Smotz.
Yeah, it's my alias.
Oh,
He's
wow.
smart.
So you
He's
really
really smart.
you're hiding under you're hiding from the government? Is that what it is?
No, not really. I'm not really that paranoid. It's a high school nickname.
Oh, sweet. All right.
Gotta love those high school nicknames. My high school nickname was Fish. So
Why didn't that stick?
Big fish, big fish.
it did stick. Some people still call me by that, and it happens. But every once in a while, it just has such a dumb story attached to it that I don't even like to be called that, because it's more, I don't mind the nickname, it's just more explaining, why do people call you Fish? And I go, I don't even want to tell you. You know what I mean?
So dumb.
So
I'll have to explain to like my grandparents why I have the wrong last name. So that's always fun.
You dishonor the
yeah,
family.
that is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Nate, what are we
Well,
doing?
you could say, okay, so this is what we're doing. We had a Patreon write in and basically ask us, and I'm not going to go because I just did this in the intro, but I basically just said, how do we know what to believe when it comes to conspiracy theories and all this different stuff? There's people out there that believe some crazy stuff, and perhaps most people would say that the flat Earth conspiracy theory, stuff like that, is pretty out there, pretty wild. Whereas my argument is Bigfoot, it doesn't seem like it's crazy. It's just an animal that lives in the woods, and some people just refuse to. I don't feel like personally that's a crazy conspiracy theory. I don't know why it sort of gets hush-hushed. But other than that, it just doesn't feel like it's absurd. Whereas some people would say flat Earth is absurd. So I'm not sure exactly where you are on the flat Earth scale.
Yeah, we were just talking about how most conspiracy theories are a scale. I don't know if you agree with this, Dan, but like there are people who are like diehards into it, And then there are people who are sort of hobbyists, and maybe part of their brain doesn't believe it, but the part that does is the same part that's terrified in a movie theater watching a horror movie. There's some sort of, little prickle on the back of their spine, and they kind of like it. It's kind of, ooh, what if it is true? Like aliens or whatever, So there's a bit of a scale in my mind, but I don't know.
Is Flat Earth just totally crazy?
Yes, it is.
So let's start there.
So just give us a little refresher on kind of what got you into talking about this and what you do.
Okay, what got me into just conspiracies in general, or into the flat Earth topic,
or podcasting?
Okay, podcasting, sure.
Just an introduction to who you are for our listeners.
Yeah,
we'll just start with everything. That's fine.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start with conspiracies because that started before any of the other two things. I just started digging into things here and there. Just, this 9/11 stuff is a little interesting, whatever. And I mean, that snowballed into, once you start, you can't stop. It's a drug. You got to look into the next thing, because YouTube is like, hey, if you like this, you'll also like looking into Sandy Hook and this and the moon landing and all that. And it's just kind of snowballed into just an interest that I have. I find a lot of the cases that people bring up just fascinating, and think that they should be looked into, even if whether I believe them or not. As far as the flat Earth thing, it was fairly recently, like within the last year, that I started digging into that, because as I'm sure you all are probably still in the mindset of, it's absurd, it's obviously stupid, which might be true. And I will say that I don't believe that the Earth is flat, but I also don't believe that we're being told the proper information about the shape of the Earth, as crazy as that sounds. I was just digging through some YouTube videos and was like, let's give this nonsense a try. And
but what is like the main, just like, I honestly have no idea what the flat earthers believe. Can you just give our listeners and Matt and I just like an overview of like, here's what it is? You don't have to say you're in or out. Just what is it? Okay.
Yeah. Well, the thing about flat Earth is that it can be tested, actually. And I know you're going to have some trolls that hate me even saying these things, but I'll own it. I'm fine with it. I'm all about uncomfortable discussion. So there are, I'm not like a mathematics guy. If you want all the mathematics, you can talk to somebody like Marty Leeds, who came on my podcast. He's a freaking math genius, but the mathematics don't really add up what they say as far as, and yes, I know I'm using they, and I'm going to get yelled at for it, but the mathematics don't add up as far as the curvature and, how far down something should be behind the horizon line based on how far away from you it is. Now we are able to, with technology, we're able to see 60 to 200 miles across plains and across flat bodies of water, and we can see objects much further than we scientifically should be able to.
So that's the one tenet, is that you can use a telescope and you can point it out across a flat piece of Earth, and you can test. You can go 200 miles, plant a flag, and see every rung of that flag. Say you painted it, and it was red at the very bottom. You could see the red, and so that's essentially what they're saying, and that's a tested fact.
Well, yeah, there's tons and tons of different things. Like there's hundreds of videos on YouTube of people looking out across the water and seeing a ship supposedly disappear below the horizon, and then you can zoom in on it and see every detail of that ship again, and you can follow it much further than you should be able to. And there's a guy, I don't remember his name offhand, but he took a picture from Michigan of the Chicago skyline, which was like 60 miles away, and if you run the numbers, that whole skyline should have been well below the horizon line. So,
really? Based on the curvature of the Earth?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That is interesting. So I guess the premise of the whole thing is, now if that's like the first tenet, right? So we have evidence with our eyes that the Earth is not as curved as we are told, at least. So where do you get from that to the Earth is a disk?
Before we jump into that,
Sure.
Are you kind of saying that the Earth is kind of like, say, like if you had a piece of fruit that was round, but it had sort of an oval seed, and the fleshy part of the fruit is like the atmosphere. So when we look at the Earth from the space, it looks round, but the actual dirt part of the Earth is more oval shaped? Is that? Okay,
No,
I'm totally lost then.
Well, that's fine. There's so much to this. I mean, if you're into this stuff, you're probably in the camp that thinks that the Earth is a flat disk. Maybe it's a disk. Maybe it just goes on and on past what we are able to explore. But there's a firmament overhead, as explained in the Bible, that is basically like a dome. So like all these shows and movies like Under the Dome and The Truman Show and all that. Basically, that's it. And you can't go to space. And you can't take pictures of the Earth. And all these composites that we get of these blue marbles that every single one, the continents change in shape and size. And there's like copied over composites of like clouds and things like that. Just shady stuff. So basically, space is kind of a myth if you are into this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So the implications of flat Earth, I mean, let's go back to the beginning of it, because obviously once you imply that the Earth is flat, then you have to then implicate every single person throughout history who has said, this is physics, this is astrophysics, this is how planetary shapes orbit each other, this is how gravity works, et cetera, et cetera. So basically the entire history of science comes into question, which at that point makes me highly skeptical of a conspiracy theory, because it's throwing basically everything out the window and saying it's all, basically at this point, everything we know is a conspiracy. But let's go back to the beginning then, because, once you make those implications, it gets too big to really dissect it. I'm going to go back to the basic tenets here. So you have someone who can see for what they claim is 100 miles, and the Earth is not curved. They can see an object far away. Now, that begs the question: why can you see that object far away? Or is that object that far away? And how can we confirm that? And 3, is the mathematics that we're doing about the curvature of the Earth correct? Have we been told it was correct, or are we sure that we're doing the correct mathematics? And there's a lot of questions about that.
If those mathematics aren't correct, sorry to cut you off. If those mathematics aren't correct, then that calls the scientific community into question as well, because that would mean that they're lying to us at least about something.
Right, or they're mistaken.
Sure.
And there have been massive assumptions in the scientific community that they've brushed over, and then like 100 years later, someone was like, no, that whole thing's wrong. And then they correct themselves. So science it doesn't acquiesce in a way that we often want. Like sometimes it's a very slow, dull tool, and it plods on, and every scientist is trying to disprove a theory, because that's as good as proving or at least building a theory. And it's a lot easier to disprove a theory because you just poke holes in it. And that's just the nature of the scientific method: is here's your theory, now throw all the poke all the holes at it and see if it stands up.
Matt,
go ahead.
I think part of the issue with, and this is where I'm in the camp.
I'm trying to find the leap between I see something on the horizon to all of science is nil.
It's not just based on that one thing. There are other things as well. But
there is like sort of some ideas on like, one, there's corporate science. Corporate science tells the consumer the science they want to hear to further the money chain, right? There's a lot of people that come out and say, "Oh yeah, glyphosate isn't bad for you."
Yeah, 9 out of 10 doctors approve of this terrible thing that'll hurt you. Right.
Yeah, right. And then there's like government cover-up science.
So this is a huge issue, right? Because whether or not you can trust the scientific literature is massive. I mean, obviously we can trust some of it, right? We built skyscrapers and bridges using Newtonian physics, and that works. And we can see those and touch those with our hands, and that works. So like some of the science seems to work pretty well, and we have evidence right before our eyes that those same equations work, in engineering for a bridge. But but then at some point we go, well, it doesn't answer the question of now.
Sorry, Dan. You probably have a lot to say, and we're not letting you talk at all.
No, you're fine. Go ahead. Everybody's got to work through it on their own way.
Yeah. Well, all I'm saying is yes, you have corporate science, which is a totally different subject, and we can talk about whether or not science should be in bed with business. But talking about the literature of like critical non-corporate science, we'd be throwing all that out as well. So go back to the beginning. Okay, we have a point in the distance that we can see. That begs a question. Now, whether or not we've answered that question correctly, put that aside. What else is sort of like begging the question? What other piece of information confuses us about what we've been told about a spherical Earth?
Well, from the digging that I've done, there is no evidence of a curvature on our horizon, no matter how high you go. More importantly, if you go up, okay, imagine you're on a ball of any size. The horizon is curving down away from you, even if it's at such a minimal degree that you want to be able to see it, correct?
Sorry, go back and say that again. I was just thinking about. I was thinking about the fact that you said there was no evidence for the curvature. Of the
I'll come
Earth
back to that.
Okay,
sure.
If you're standing on a giant Earth ball and you're trying to look at the ground, you can't see it because it's curving down. You can't see the bottom of the ball. Is that what you're saying?
Well, imagine you're an ant and you're placed on a basketball. If you are slowly raised up off that basketball, are you going to be able to look straight out and see that basketball going straight out at your horizon or at your eye line? Or is it going to be going down as you go up? If you go up in the air, no matter how high you go, the horizon line always stays at eye level, which indicates that it's going straight out, not curving down. You should have to look down at it.
Well, I mean, then there's a host of people who have been in the Earth's atmosphere who have looked down and had spiritual experiences about seeing this pale blue dot. And then at that point you go, okay, is that evidence? I mean, you have tons of photographic evidence, you have tons of eyewitness testimony of astronauts and all that. And so suddenly you go, they are all implicated in the conspiracy, and the conspiracy now grows beyond just science has lied to us. Then now it's astronauts. Now it's all of NASA. Eventually it's pilots. Pilots are all paid off. Any pilot that's flown over the poles is lying.
It doesn't have to be that big of a club, really. I mean, if you look at the military, this guy only knows what the guy above him tells him, and that guy only knows what the guy above him tells him, and they're informed not to say anything other than what they're told. Well, and they only know that. It doesn't have to be a giant amount of people. Unless
you take into account human nature, which on one hand, conspiracy theories love military testimony because if it supports the theory, which is
sure.
People who are ex-military love to talk about stuff, and so I don't think you can say
not a lot of them. Well, a lot of them want to be blacked out. They don't want to talk. And
well, I don't think you can say that people will just accept information given to them and not ask their own questions. I think the human heart is curious.
If they're afraid of their safety, they are.
Okay, well that aside, so if you go up, you're saying that nobody sees the curvature. Say they're on an airplane, nobody sees the curvature, and if they do see a curve, which I know if you get high enough, you should be able to. You should be able to. Then that would be some sort of optical illusion, or
no, not necessarily. All the videos that are out there that show this curvature of an Earth from like weather balloons or like the Red Bull jump or the Viceland cam that they sent up, it shows a curve, but it is very evidently a fisheye lens because, you'll see this horizon line, and when it's in the middle, it's straight. When it goes up, it's concave and convex, like it's shifting back and forth. It's very apparent that is the lens that is making that effect. Otherwise, we have to also accept the idea that we have like a concave Earth as well.
Okay, so the pictures are all fisheye. Then that's the way they answer that one. If you go up
Typically.
and see a curved Earth, then that is just a fisheye lens, and that's an optical illusion. In reality, nobody sees that. That's just a camera trick, essentially.
Well, in the Red Bull jump, I don't know. I'm sure you probably haven't looked into any of this garbage, but there's this Red Bull jump where this guy goes up into the atmosphere and does a skydive, and it was for Red Bull, I believe.
Sure.
So there's a camera on the outside that shows this curve. Then it also, like when the door opens, you can see a shot of the guy from the inside, and it's with a different camera, and you can see that this horizon line is straight out at eye level of the camera, and it is perfectly flat.
Huh. And yeah, so there's two different cameras, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with a different kind of depth of field and focus. I don't even know much about camera stuff. Okay,
Well,
so I guess what I'm assuming is the Red Bull jump was thrown at the flat Earth community as, look, the Earth is curved, you guys are idiots, and the flat Earth community went back in and saw a different angle that sort of backed up the theory.
Right, yeah, I mean, the Red Bull jump wasn't put out with the intention of being thrown at the flat Earth people, but of course, debunkers use that against, and flat Earthers use it for. So
I know we were just Nate and I were just talking about the superiority and the arrogance of both sides of a lot of issues. I'm so smart that I've figured it out. It's both sides say that, right?
Yes, and I hope I don't come across that way, because I freely say every single time I talk about this, I don't know jack shit. So I'm totally fine with that.
The next question that's always asked to me whenever I'm talking about some of these things is like, so why would they do all this? And that seems like the next question, the dumb question is, so if the Earth is flat or some kind of flat, what's the point of keeping that information from the public?
That's a deep question that brings up a lot of weird other conspiracy stuff.
Just to let people know, the flat Earth community is not necessarily unified in any of it.
Sure.
So there's a lot of different theories about why, and some of them are a lot more wacky than others.
Oh, you've looked into it, Matt. Are you a flat earther?
No, I'm looking at a couple articles right now. So I was yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, my personal favorite explanation is, you can dig into evidence of the occult in our higher up society, and satanic goings on in that world. And so if you're taking biblical stuff and all that into account, and going down that route, it would be Satan is trying to hide God, trying to discredit God's creation, God's perfect creation, where we are on this flat earth that has a dome over it, a firmament, and everything is what the Bible says, and God is directly above us, and we are not.
Does the Bible say there's a flat earth?
The Bible has about 75 verses that seem to imply flat earth, if not say it, yeah.
There's some verses that also imply a spherical earth as well. But
so is there a dark side of the moon?
But here's the thing. I looked that up. There is a dark side of the moon.
Pink Floyd really believes so. So do you guys believe so?
There is, yeah, because the Earth, the moon rotates around the Earth basically at the same speed. It takes about a month for it to spin. So the side we see of the moon, it is the side that it's spinning to. So we actually don't ever see the back side.
So the moon is round, but the Earth is flat.
I don't know.
Those are Matt's words.
No.
Well, no, I know. I'm just saying, is that the?
Let me go back to this. So this is a biblical literalists essentially taking 4,000-year-old words and just wholesale ripping them and going, this is exactly what was meant by that. And
what's that? I don't. What are these verses?
Well, there's the firmament, and behind the water was divided. This is Genesis. This is just
there's Isaiah, four corners of the earth, 3 different times mentioned.
Right, the 4 corners.
He made the earth stationary, basically.
The 4 corners would is also like a like an ancient way of understanding the four directions, the north, south,
Sure.
east, west, and the four winds that come from those directions and how that changes the seasons, etc. So, I mean, just to wholesale rip it and not really do like an
Well, if you can
exegesis
see,
on it.
if you can see four angels standing at four corners of the earth, how does that work if it's just direction?
Well, if it's four corners of the earth, how come we have a disc?
Okay, so great question. So if you imagine, it also the earth is the Lord's footstool, which is interesting. So
Can we just sit on that for a second? Sit on that footstool. This is metaphorical speaking, right? This is not literal scientific post-enlightenment speaking. This is ancient people using metaphors to explain reality in their day. It's not science, right? So, and they didn't see it as science.
It's not like Noah's Ark where it's like build it 4 cubits.
They
long
didn't see
right?
it. They didn't see it as, listen, kids, this is God's footstool. Literally, if you say that this is God's chair, you're gonna burn. Like they didn't. That's the way we see truth, right? Like especially when we've marred our religious ideologies with science in the post-enlightenment age. But that's not the way that Bible people saw things. So like taking a metaphor and going, well, that's literal,
Sure.
and that points to something.
I'm
literal.
playing devil's advocate here. I barely even believe that the Bible is inerrant. So I'm just playing devil's advocate, throwing out points.
No, I don't think I'm arguing with you at all. I'm just
Sure.
I'm taking the points and going and holding them up and flipping them around and trying to mess with them. So
But there is some confusion there with the Bible verses that perhaps the earth isn't what we think it is, right?
Yes.
they did the yeah. Sorry, go ahead, continue. I can't sit on that one too long, but because I'll blow a lid. It's just
Yeah, I'm sure that's how
there is-
everybody feels right now.
unbelievable.
So the corners, if you look up like a flat Earth map, it's so there's a square with a dip circle, or not a dip, but a circle in the center with the dome over it. Yeah, and we can talk about more Bible verses if you want to, or we can get into more interesting stuff.
No, the Bible is not.
Yeah, give us the
No.
interesting stuff.
Stay away from the Bible. If we're gonna judge this based on science,
Don't
let's stick
taint
with
my
science.
Bible.
But simply knowing that this is motivated by biblical literalism just really discredits the whole theory off the bat to me, because the Bible is just, by all Bible scholars and theologians, you can't do that with the text. It's not, you have to go deeper than just wholesale ripping things into English and saying that's what this means. So let's just keep the Bible out of this. Let's talk about the science and maybe talk about how all the scientists are liars and what they've been paid potentially.
Well, let's go back to history. Admiral Byrd was an explorer, like the most world-renowned explorer back whenever, I don't remember. Facts and all that. So he explored the North Pole and attempted to explore Antarctica. And when he did explore Antarctica, he had several expeditions there. In his first expedition, he informed everybody, told all the news media and everybody that this well of natural resources, oil and coal and everything, all this stuff is there. It's a gold mine. And so he does another exploration, goes further, and supposedly runs into this 200 to 300 foot ice wall, which, for those that don't know, I guess this hasn't been pointed out, Antarctica, in this theory, is not on the bottom.
It's in the center.
Actually, no, it's all the way around.
Oh, it's the edges,
outside.
right? It's the edges. My
Right.
bad. So the Arctic is in the center.
Yes. So there's this ice wall that cannot be climbed because it's treacherous.
By the
and-
way, we're not just throwing away physics and astrophysics here, or the way that objects move around each other, or gravity, or any of Newton's laws. We're also throwing away all of meteorology, all of weather science, and how, because we're talking about poles. We're talking about the Earth core, and then how the sun coming across the Earth and how that warms things at the equator. Like, that's all out the window. The equator is out the window, essentially.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Just
So-
checking.
So there's this, there's this giant wall of ice going all the way around, which would make sense if there's this giant dome that is surrounding us and it's colder on the other side. Whatever. So they set up this new exploration that is called Operation High Jump, which is telling. And then after they do Operation High Jump, which I might not be getting my timeline right, so don't fact check me, or do look into it on your own. But so after Operation High Jump, they come back and there's this. Well, they set up the Antarctica Treaty, which all the powerful nations agreed to sign, where nobody can explore Antarctica anymore. You can't go deep into Antarctica on your own to just find these things out for yourself, which, of course, you would have to have a giant expedition in order to do so. But after that, they have Operation Fishbowl, which is a telling name also, in my opinion. But this operation was where these countries were literally just firing nukes up into the air, straight up. All at the same time. And it was supposedly to test how our atmosphere reacts to nuclear explosions, which who put these guys in charge that are allowed to shoot nukes up into the air for science? Seems like a terrible idea to me. But so people would, and if you look at the footage, it seems a little fishy, like they might be running into something up there. Just some weird history stuff that is used in this nonsense.
Right.
But what if this is kind of like something back in the day where a couple people discovered something and we're all wrong, but we think we're right. I think the hard part is that, like, in the age of information, we still don't believe, and this is kind of what I run into, I guess, all the time with the Bigfoot thing, is everyone goes, we would have known. We have so much technology. There's no way we can't know everything. And I just sort of think that it's kind of foolish to just presume that we would completely, like, there's no chance that maybe something's a little bit weird here.
Yeah,
maybe there's something, right?
I think it's a far leap to go from there's something we don't know to every single professional scientist who understands the universe.
You can't make that leap
way.
in 30-minute discussion on Skype either,
Oh,
so.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is they make that leap with a justification. They go, there's something we don't know. Therefore, eventually, maybe in 16 days, they get to every single scientist who's ever studied all those mathematical equations that build bridges don't work outside of the dome or something like that. Like, that's not the way, that's not the nature of the universe. And so therefore they're lying, not only because they can't not only be mistaken, right? They have to be lying for it to be believable for a conspiracy theorist in this regard, right? Like, they can't just, there's no way all the scientists are mistaken. So there has to be nefarious activity.
Does the Earth then look kind of like a cake bowl, like a cake baking bowl, where it's kind of like a little bit round, and then it kind of is that what you're talking? Is that, or is it completely? People think it's completely flat.
Well,
is there any shape to
basically completely flat. It might dip down underneath. Who knows? But it's basically completely flat.
So all the explorers who have gone around the world, they've just kind of done a circle around the outside.
Yeah, well, you got to look at the map to understand, like, how that would work. Like, if the North Pole is actually in the center and the South Pole is actually all the way around the outside, and your compass is telling you that you're going east, you're going to go east, and you're going to end up back in the same place because you're going in a circle.
Okay, so yeah, because if a compass doesn't work, if a compass will hook you around back to where you were, that's weird. So there's no real due east; it's a due arc. It's not a straight direction.
Right.
There are no four corners in that regard, then.
It's the four corners are outside the dome. Four corners outside the dome.
East is a circle.
So what happens when you get to the edge of the Earth? You fall off?
There's a dome. You can't. There's either a dome. Some people
you hit the wall. You hit the Truman Show wall.
Basically, I mean, that's one theory. Some people also believe that this 200, 300-foot wall of ice, we wouldn't be able to get over. But it stretches out.
Great. I love this. It's like Game of Thrones. The wall.
Yes, exactly.
Winter is coming, my friends. And I would actually prefer a world in which zombies raided us from the Northlands.
Oh man, so So what percentage of you believes in this?
You really gonna make me answer that question?
Hey, you made me do it on your
You're
podcast.
You're obviously. I mean, I think
Hey, I made you do it in the bonus content.
I think you're. I think you're into it. I think maybe it's like you're. Maybe you don't want to be made fun of for it, but that's fine.
I put it out there 100% that I believe in Bigfoot, and people have left this podcast in droves.
No, they haven't.
So
they love you for it. It's popular to believe in Bigfoot.
Honestly,
I'm
I would
100%
probably.
in for Bigfoot.
I would probably gain more listeners to my show if I said I believe this 100%, but I don't. I mean, maybe there's a part of me that doesn't want to just because of publicity's sake. I don't want to be the flat Earth guy necessarily, but I don't have any problem with saying I think that there's a fairly decent chance that this might be accurate. And like I said at the beginning, at the very least, I don't think that the Earth is exactly what they say it is.
How do they get But how did they get from,
what you say it is then? How about that?
Yeah, well, I don't actually know. I trust the professionals, and not blindly, by the way, because I'm looking. I can look at city skylines and I can see our technology and how far it's advanced, and so I know that we have more power in our pockets in our iPhones than any civilization before us could ever imagine. And so individual intellect.
It's still spinning though, right? It's still spinning.
No.
But it's just flat.
It's not.
So
it's
not
flat and
spinning.
stationary.
So basically Newtonian physics out the window completely. So everything that you see was built on equations that essentially originated with Isaac Newton, and all of those laws of physics, those fundamental laws.
Yeah. What is gravity then?
Out the window.
Well, the idea of gravity is much simpler on a flat Earth than it is on a globe, in my opinion. Up is up and down is down, and heavy, like things with more mass, go down.
Why?
Can you explain gravity? Can you explain why a giant thing spins fast enough that things get sucked into it, but the Big Bang also explodes them out of it?
A giant thing spinning. No, it's the law of mass. So mass is magnetic. That's essentially what gravity is. So the idea that small things are drawn to big things. So the moon rotates around the Earth, and we're drawn to the Earth because the Earth is the biggest thing close to us. And if there was something bigger, the Earth's atmosphere would likely fall apart, and we'd be drawn to that.
Yeah. See, I have such a big heart that Matt's drawn to mine.
I'm probably saying that way wrong.
He's
and
got
gravity,
such a small heart.
And gravity is an unknown. I'm probably saying that all wrong. And someone who actually understands gravity probably, but I don't think it has anything to do with spinning per se. The theory of
You've ever been on like that Gravitron, that ride when it's spinning? You're like, things get weird.
So
you start floating up, and you can kind of understand that like something happens weird when things start spinning.
So the theory of relativity is essentially Einstein's E equals mc squared, which is essentially like when you're driving along and you're moving at 60 miles an hour in a car, you can hold a cup of coffee, and if the road is relatively flat, it won't spill. Or you can put it on the dashboard even if the road is flat. And that coffee is moving in relation to the car, and therefore there is no exchange in or diversion of energy. The coffee's not going to spill. But if you slam on your brakes and slow dramatically the speed of the car, the coffee will then spill over because it is traveling at a speed faster in relation to the thing beneath it. So that's how we're all standing on Earth. It's a theory of relativity. It's essentially us in the car, So the Earth's spinning, we're not going to spin off of it. And just understanding that principle and that, I think, that equation, which has helped us build all this civilization, that equation is fundamentally true and testable and true. And then to say, well, that's not true, throw that away too. Einstein was a liar and a fraud too, I guess. Is that what they're saying?
Not necessarily. Maybe he's wrong. That's all.
Einstein's wrong, but I'm right. That's what
I'm not saying that at all.
No, but that's what the theory says, right? Einstein's wrong, Newton's wrong, Darwin's wrong. Basically, these archaic texts totally misinterpreted out of the Bible that Bible scholars wouldn't even affirm those interpretations at all. That's what I'm going on, and then I use my eyes and I connect all these dots. And what's the intent? I think the intent is far more nefarious. It's about identity. It's about wrapping yourself around an identity of meaning, because you lack meaning. Your life is bereft of meaning, and so you want something meaningful beneath the surface. And I think that's what draws people to this. Like, science is hurting my literalist reading of scripture, so therefore I need to find the great conspiracy of science and
I don't
debunk
think it's
it.
that. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. I think you have people that are totally atheists that might believe in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's quite a few that point this to alien existence and us being trapped inside this dome also. So there's a bunch of different ways that this
the
could
funny
go.
thing is I just read this Under the Dome by Stephen King. It's a good book. And yes,
So,
it was aliens.
Okay, so you can't get out of the dome, which means we never went to the moon.
So anybody who's ever gotten to the dome, and no one's gotten there, or they've gotten there and how do they explain, like, everyone's lying about it? And why would they lie about it? I mean, well, let me just read from one website why they would. Okay, here we go. Why would generations of scientists lie? Well, they are leagued in conspiracy against God. Why else? Even though many of the scientists were deists at least, and not atheist at all, and many famous scientists were Christian. Here's what a website says. The number one reason they lie is a biblical and gospel related reason. The ball earth is the foundation for evolution and the Big Bang, which both put God completely out of the picture, which I don't think they do. I think that's a huge assumption. But I mean, essentially, here, let's just stop here. Science says everything came from nothing. Well, okay, or exploded. Well, what is the source? What is the singularity? What is the explosion? That could easily be God. So it doesn't put God completely out of the picture. But then they go on to say, if the world is run by the satanic elite, which it is, then their primary goal would be to discredit and hide God, making us believe he doesn't exist. Without the globe earth lie, all of Satan's deception are blown out of the water. That's what it's. It
there you go.
Even say Satan's deceptions. It says Satan's deception are blown out of the water. Which
let's take a boat. Let's take a boat to the end of the dome, baby.
Yeah.
We can't go into Antarctica because of the Antarctica Treaty. That's the problem.
You can fly over. You can fly over the Arctic, no problem, though.
You can go over parts of Antarctica.
So if you were in a plane and you kept going, you'd run into the wall.
If that were possible, then
yeah, planes.
In theory, yes.
Planes go over the poles all the time, though. If you look at the flight paths on websites.
And how come when you fly in the airplane, like if you fly to Japan or something, when you're flying to Japan, it takes like an extra hour, and when you're flying back, you fly back at a shorter time?
Well, I don't remember the specifics on this, but there's actually a lot of theories around flight paths. There are a lot of flight paths that don't make any sense if on a globe that make more sense, the path that they take on a flat Earth, because that's more of a straight line on a flat Earth. And that's really all I can say on that. But there also, if you track the GPS of different flights, things in the southern hemisphere tend to, when they take off, and you can track them all the way to the ocean. And then once they get over the ocean, the GPS or the tracker just cuts off, and then it reappears. If you follow it all the way to its destination, it reappears right before it gets on land, which one might speculate would be to keep people from realizing that it's going in more of a straight line to go this way. And it doesn't make any sense for them to be going under or around or whatever.
Yeah. That's not necessarily as convincing. But that's another little nugget, and I think a lot of these theories go on the nuggets. It's like, the melting point of steel, man. And they just keep going back to the nugget.
Oh, I'll give you nuggets, buddy. I'll give you some big old Bigfoot nugget.
I mean,
when Bigfoot
you can take your nuggets and shove it if you're saying that every scientist of all time is either lying or wrong about their mathematical equations that have been proven functional in the real world that we can touch, taste, and feel.
You know what, Matt? You know what's going to be funny is if humans don't believe in this shape of the Earth, we end up killing ourselves because we don't understand things, and Bigfoot inherits the flat Earth and takes over.
That would be great. If I think we deserve Bigfoot to inherit the flat Earth, if we have this kind of idiocy floating around the internet, masquerading as science. It's just not.
No, I'm not saying I believe in it at all. I just think that, man, there are nuggets. There are some
and
damn
here's the
good
thing,
nuggets.
and we've talked about this before, and they've done studies on this. The human brain finds pattern in meaningless information. You can show people meaningless bits of data and ask them what the pattern is or what it means, and their brains will naturally go to make a pattern, because human beings are meaning makers. We make meaning out of meaningless things, and that's how we can function in society. The problem with people today is that we have relatively meaningless lives. We live on the surface of everything. Most of our days are spent looking at a blue screen, and we want to go deep. We have this natural void in our lives that is magnetized to meaning, and because of the proliferation of falsehoods on the internet, it's so easy to go find meaning and get that natural desire sated by conspiracy theories. And that's why people are attached to it. And they also attach meaning to their identity. So once they've figured out what's underneath the surface and their meaning making soul is sated, they now have an identity where they know something that other people don't, and they have arrogance about that and feel superior to people. That's just the way it is. I mean, people make meaningful connections that aren't
I'm the one that's saying these guys are ignorant. Who's being more superior here?
I'm not saying they're ignorant. I'm saying they are.
That was your word that you used.
Well, yes. I'll say this. They're being ignorant of all the science and all the people who have dedicated their lives to studying this in a provable way. Like, I'm just saying, go look at a bridge when you drive over it. All the theories that they say are foolish and lies built that bridge. All the mathematical equations, all the physics, all the engineering, all of that has used equations that they say are wrong. So that's what I'm saying. It's ignorant of the science that is proven true in the real world.
Sure. You're probably right. So, Matt, you said earlier that, of course, it is a giant leap to go from, this thing doesn't add up to the Earth is flat. And absolutely, I give you that. Now, if you did the test yourself and you knew that the equation was absolutely right in what science is saying, and you found out that this one thing doesn't add up, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, I would ask a number of different questions. So here I have a theory. Using the scientific method, you have a theory. You put a post in the ground or whatever. You have your telescope, and you're able to see for 200 miles in some place on Earth that who knows exists. But that isn't obstructed. You have a view, at least, that there's nothing in the way. And then you put that thing down 200 miles away, and then you go back 200 miles, which takes you hours and hours and hours, obviously. And then you look at it through the telescope, and if you see it, you go, wow, I shouldn't be able to see that based on... Now, this is assuming that you do the curvature equations properly, right? Right. And so there you have one test, right? And if it begs the question, I shouldn't be able to see it, that math is correct. I've tested it, and I can see it. What are other factors that would help me see it? Is there an optical illusion? Is there an angle that I'm taking that I'm actually looking down at it instead of straight on? Am I really doing all the equations? And you start to try to poke holes in that instead of just going from, I can see it, then 15 decisions later, the Earth is flat, which I think people just jump to that. Like, if you have a theory, test your theory, prove your theory by throwing
Absolutely.
all the data at your theory, and don't just move from one saying, okay, it's not flat, so then what? Okay, well, then the scientists were wrong. Okay, so then what? Well, NASA's a bunch of Satanists. Okay, so then what? And like, it's not the scientific method. That's why it doesn't stand up against science, because science uses the method.
You say that, but and you'll probably disagree with this, but there are countless numbers of people who dig into this stuff, and they start out, all of them basically have the same story. I heard about this, thought it was complete bullshit. So I started to try to debunk it. And after this test, I don't necessarily believe it, but I'm having a hard time debunking it. And this stuff is kind of starting to add up. I mean, it's not just guys,
Yeah.
YouTubers being like, "Oh, I watched this video." I mean, that's me because I haven't done the tests.
I don't
But
doubt that there's those people, but for every one of those, there's another that looks into it and debunks it on YouTube as well. So there are those who see and those who believe, blindly that this is even possible, that a conspiracy that large with that many people involved is even possible. And I guess that's kind of like backing myself in the corner just to say that a conspiracy that large is impossible. I believe that Bigfoot is far more possible because there's so much we don't understand about. Even, we've explored 5% of our oceans, for instance. But to say that
after talking to Nate yesterday, I agree with you. Well,
exactly. And so here's the fact. There are creatures in the forest that we have not discovered yet. It's a fact. They're nocturnal, probably. That's why we haven't discovered them. That's a fact. We will discover them. And so whether or not it's a Bigfoot, I don't know. But I'm saying there's facts, right? But to say that all of science that we can testably prove in reality to be true is now false, that's a huge claim. And then to say that everybody, all the scientists are lying because they're paid off, I think that just negates the nature of human nature. Like, people don't sleep at night if they live with this cognitive dissonance of that level. Like, people always expose. And I think the lack of scientists and the lack of data on the flat earth thing really discredits it. And the fact that it's rooted in
you're saying that there's a lack of scientists, a lack of data, but have you really looked into it to see if there are the scientists and the data? You can't just say they're not out there, so it doesn't exist.
Have you looked into it is a thing I hear a lot.
I know. And I tried to avoid it.
No, but
I'm sure there's 10 people out there that are screaming at me for not presenting this in the proper way. So there's not really anything else I can say other than do look into it.
Just tell me, are there scientists, real physicists and engineers who are like practicing in the field, who are researchers who say, yeah, flat earth, totally?
Probably. And if I find them, I'll let you know.
All right. Because I would guarantee anybody who would denounce Einstein, denounce Newton, they're not scientists. It's called pseudoscience. People who say that the world as it is, proven by all these equations, does not it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, and then just the breadth of it, just like all the pilots who are like, yeah, I fly over the poles, they're all liars somehow. And then all the astronauts who've been out in orbit working on space stations or going to the moon, they're all liars. And I know there's a whole conspiracy about the moon landing too, but just the fact that they all are lying is just improbable, knowing what I know about human nature. You just can't be sure.
No. I mean,
be sure your sins will find you out, right? If you want to use the Bible.
No, the moon landing, it would be like a few people knew, and the rest of NASA was all going forward with the plan as usual. It's just the broadcast was different, and they're just a few people. I mean, most of the time, people think that everyone had to know, and everyone would be lying.
But Buzz Aldrin is a liar, essentially, right?
Well.
Correct. That's what they would say.
Yeah.
Buzz Aldrin's been lying for years. Yeah.
Yeah. So what basically, what would have to have happened to kind of live this theory down is if someone sat him down and said, look, the whole space program is going to get shut down if we don't make this happen. So yeah, you're going to have to go through with this crazy idea to keep the space program going and to keep us number one in the world.
And then you're going to have to do interviews.
To have a job the rest of your life.
You're going to have to do interviews for the rest of your life as a complete fraud. What that does to a human being, I think we just undermine the fact that a human being will blow the lid off everything for their own integrity eventually if they've not been completely suffocated. He's out there doing interviews on the whole thing and like nonstop talking about it. Like, the cognitive dissonance eventually breaks someone down. And then we're not just talking about him. We're talking about probably 600,000 scientists, all liars, all doing the same thing.
No. I don't think people. What I'm saying is, I think that you don't question things that are. You just kind of move on from the fact.
Here's the truth. my buddy's a nurse, right? And he says when you're diagnosing a patient or you're trying to figure out what it is, it's like the patient has their own ideas, and they go, I think it's a zebra. And you go, well, it's probably a horse. Like zebras aren't really in this part of, if you thought it was a zebra, it's probably a horse. And it's always going to be the closest between, the closest path between two objects, essentially. That's where the truth is. It's in the easiest description. And the easiest description is not that all these scientists are all lying. Like thousands and thousands of people over hundreds and hundreds of years lying. That is a preposterous thing to propose to people. And it's the easiest way is that they're not. That's the truth. The truth is that they're not lying. So, I mean, that's at least one of my defenses against a lot of these conspiracy theories that tend to implicate massive amounts of people. Bigfoot doesn't implicate that many people. I mean, you might say, well, park rangers, they want people to go to the park, so they hide it or whatever. Like, that's fine. A couple park rangers implicated, okay. But all of we know about modern science out the window. I don't know how you can get there.
Silence. Silence has creeped over the podcast.
Good monologue. I'm not sure where to go from there.
Yeah, Matt's a tough guy to try to get that brain of Matt's to roll over on a different side. But
it's all right.
We keep pushing him on that bed, but he doesn't want to roll over ever.
No. Can't do it for flat Earth. Sorry.
Hey, you know what? This whole thing has been a big conspiracy to get Matt to finally say Bigfoot exists.
Is far more, believable than flat Earth. Please.
So flat Earth accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, which is to redeem myself. Totally redeemed.
Make you look totally sane because there's crazier people out there than you.
Yeah, well, Nate.
Oh yeah.
Nate loves to troll people, and I've been trolled with this whole topic. So you're welcome, everybody. Nate fed the troll.
Oh, I fed it. I fed that troll. He's just lying firm in his bed, and he will not move. I don't know. I mean, this is one of those subjects. It's going to take a long time to even understand what it is. I still am really confused. It's fascinating.
Your little meaning maker in your heart perks up.
Oh,
and goes, ooh, some meaning. I like meaning.
Matt, you would have a meaning maker in your heart if you had a heart to have it in.
Yeah.
In my heart, there's only Jesus, Dan. Only Jesus.
Oh,
not conspiracies.
That's why the gravitational pull of my heart is working on Matt's. But I will say that. I will say that I'm consistently arguing that we know so much less than we think we do. And there are people who do control the information, and they are motivated to control information.
Well, why don't they shut down all these flat Earth sites if it's going to blow their whole thing wide open?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's always different.
They could do it, and they're very powerful people. They've got 600,000 scientists shaking in their booties.
No, I don't think so. I think that it's.
I came up with that number at random, by the way, so don't quote me on that.
They keep it at the tabloid section for a reason. We all look stupid, but there might be some nuggets in there, Matt, that are going to shake
so
you.
we can't
wake
even.
You up
This whole thing has just been flat Earth. We can't even talk about what fake news is and what is peer reviewed and what is worth. Like, how do you diagnose a theory as something valid and true? Are there actually true scientists doing the scientific method and research on it? And is it peer reviewed, and is it from a reputable source? I mean, those are the things that I'd really care about. But I think the problem with flat Earth is that it exists in this realm of the internet that just isn't reviewed at all. It's not accredited. Nobody validates any of it. And so when people say to me, do your research, I'm like, that's not research. That's spam.
Who's the Bill Nye of flat Earth? Who's the guy that's actually like legitimately saying, look into it?
There's quite a few, actually. Honestly, I've jumped around between a couple. I had a guy named, like I said, Marty Leeds on my podcast. He talks about a bunch of different conspiracies, and he's really big into numerology and mathematics and that type of thing. Does lectures and all that. A guy that I recently discovered is Rob Skiba, and he's into a whole bunch of different things too. And he is one of the ones that I was saying. He started out just ignoring this theory, thinking that it was complete waste of time, and then, heard some ideas and so did some tests, performed them, quite a few of them, and is still ongoingly performing them. And he says, I don't believe this 100%, but it's starting to look that way to me. And so he's a guy that I would dig into a little bit. He gets into some of the biblical implications as well. So just interesting stuff there.
Well, I believe
weird.
when SpaceX gets off the ground and everybody can just go float around in orbit for a bit, this will all be put to bed rather quickly.
I have a theory on that.
Yeah?
My theory is that SpaceX will get off the ground and it will blow up in space, and that will set the whole thing back 25 years, and there won't be people asking about this again because it's too big of a liability.
He's already had a rocket blow up on a launch pad, but I don't think anything's going to stop Mr. Tesla.
So, yeah, just throwing that out there. When that happens, just, have your little heart feelers perk up a little bit. And,
when the whole thing goes down. Yeah. Well, if it does, if there is no private, so in a sense, the space station and everything, that's false too. So the Russians are lying about it as well, and the Chinese.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, yeah, basically. There are some people that believe that. So there are some people that don't even believe in the dome. They think that we can go to space, and we are just lying about the shape of the Earth. So there's tons of different theories and different ways that this can go, and I'm not giving them all credit. Or I'm not doing them all credit. So, yeah.
Okay. So where is the unified theory for flat Earth? Like, if I wanted to, as you said, look into it, what is the kind of the best resource for me, and the kind of the most scientific. I'm trying to throw him a bone here, Nate. Don't laugh too hard.
You're so nice.
What is the most scientific resource on the internet for flat Earth? If I wanted to look into it,
I'd say look into Rob Skiba. He's Rob Skiba and Marty Leeds, and
they have a website.
Also, I believe robskiba.com. I think martyleeds33.com, and look into Eric Dubé, Mark Sargent. They give same accounts of like how these tests all work the same way. They all have different theories as to why this is a thing, and the implications of it.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, that's the stuff. That's the stuff. I mean, that's the thing. It's like
Rob
what's the
Skiba
goals?
into the Nephilim,
There you
biblical
go.
cosmology. Oh man.
Have fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of shown his cards too early. I don't know if I can trust him.
Matt, where's your sense of wonder? Where's your childlike sense of wonder?
Yeah, my meaning maker is not stuffed up the ass of some guy that believes in the literal.
I got into a lot of fights with
It's
his
stuffed
brother.
up Neil deGrasse Tyson's ass instead,
No,
right?
it isn't. And it's definitely not stuffed up Bill Nye's ass either. I'll tell you that. But there is such a thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
what the heck?
I come from scientists, right? So it does strike close to home for me. And it's not just a tribal thing, but like there is such a thing as peer-reviewed science, and it's painstakingly put together and edited and researched well with thousands of tests and studies that cost millions of dollars, and people put their whole life investigate into this stuff. And just to have some conspiracy theorists on a website say, yeah, you're all liars, is just it's offensive to the whole, to all of modern civilization. Like everything you look at outside your window that's man-made is made by this information that's been researched and proven to be functional in reality.
There
What?
are stranger things.
There are
Okay.
isn't that a TV show?
Yeah.
Well, you
And
show
the
me
new
you show me
episodes
the
are
ups
coming.
you show me the upside down, and I'll go there.
The upside down. This is a great place to maybe leave this, just wandering, floating off into the universe
No, it can't. It's going to hit the dome.
Yeah, if you're a dome guy.
before you hit the dome.
If you're a dome guy. Well, Dan, I'm sorry for yelling at you. I
I
You're
love
either
it.
a dome guy or a Smotz guy. What are you?
and I don't mean to, like, I know I can be rough or whatever with my words.
No, I love it. I fully invite it.
I don't mean to be like, I don't mean
Matt
to
makes
use,
for a good podcast, but he doesn't make good for a text thread argument.
I don't
You know
mean
what I
to
mean?
use hyperbole, and to call people names or anything. But, you know, I would say, look into the science.
See how that works both ways?
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, man. We got to do more podcasts on the meaning of truth and how to actually get facts, because it's so difficult. I mean, just this topic alone just gets me thinking, like, what do you believe? What is truth? What, like, that's a big issue, I think. So if anything, flat Earth is going to propel me that way, I think, which is a good topic.
You know what? Matt just dropped the mic and it went straight down. So I don't know if that helps prove the theories or not, guys. But when Matt drops the mic, it hits the floor and the podcast is over.
There you go.
Hey, man, you called me into this thing. That's what you get.
Until next time, don't feed the trolls, whether they're aliens or
Your
Nephilim,
podcast co-host.
or Matt's tiny Grinch heart.
10 sizes.
Three
too small.
sizes too small.
Well, you know, check the science. I don't know how many times it's too small, but look at the numbers.
You're a skeptical man, Mr. Grinch.
Might
Your
be a new one,
eyes
too.
can see the truth.
I'm sure
right.
I'm sure part of it's been resonating with. Part of my anger has been resonating with some people. So that's the whole point of this.
Most of them easily.
That's
sure.
that's the whole point of this debate is to show two sides, and I think I've done a decent job venting the anger of a lot of people.
Thanks, Dan. We brought you on last minute. I did my interview on his podcast yesterday, and I said, "Hey, come yell at Matt tomorrow." And he's like, "Okay, maybe I'll."
Yeah, Dan, you've been really gracious, and again, sorry if I yelled your ear off. But
Anytime, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to come on and to share what you've learned. Appreciate that, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, check out his podcast. The System is Down, right?
Yep. Find it at tsidpod.com or on iTunes,
right.
Stitcher, all that fun stuff. So
All right.
And you have to register an alias name to listen to the podcast because the government will be tracking.
The government's
you.
listening.
So
Yes.
have a
There you
good
go.
night, good day, or a good walk on the disc wherever you are.
Bye-bye.
see ya.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. Let me know what you think. And I want to first and foremost sincerely thank Matt and Nate for having me on their show. I really appreciate it. I don't take offense to anything that was said, and I still really enjoy everything that you guys are doing. And I would encourage everybody else to go check out their podcast, check out their music. Their podcast can be found at trollspodcast.com. And Matt Macdonald's band is The Classic Crime. Nate's is Sherwood. So go check out all that stuff because they do amazing work. And if you guys, for whatever reason, wanted to have me back on your show again, I'm always down, so feel free. But if not, I totally understand. And to the rest of you guys, if you're not familiar and you want to hear more crazy stuff like this, you can go check out my show, The System is Down. I promise we don't just talk about Flat Earth. In fact, we don't talk about it as much as you might think. This just happened to be the topic that got me on the Don't Feed the Trolls podcast. But you can check out my show at tsidpod.com or just look up The System is Down on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast platform you prefer. And if you're already a listener to The System is Down and you want to support the show and you want to get a bunch of bonus content like this, go join the Downers Club at tsidpod.com/support, and you can sign up for as little as $5 a month. All right, guys, that's it for me today on this bonus content. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, I will be back first thing Monday morning with some more uncomfortable content for you. Until then, question everything and stay uncomfortable. Thanks.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.